The entire room erupted into applause the moment my father placed the beach house keys into my sister Sarah's hand. She wasn't surprised. In fact, she smirked before she even touched them. Because everyone already knew what was happening. Sarah had always been the favorite. She was the beautiful daughter, the outgoing daughter, the daughter who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. If Sarah succeeded, it became a family celebration. If I succeeded, it was simply expected. My name is Olivia Parker, and for most of my life, I had accepted my place in the family hierarchy. Sarah came first, I came second. That was just the way things worked. So when my parents organized a huge celebration for Sarah's graduation, nobody questioned why the entire family had been invited to Grandpa's beach house. The beach house wasn't just another property. It had been in our family for more than 40 years. My grandfather, Richard Parker, had built it from the ground up. Every wooden beam, every deck board, every room carried a story. Some of my happiest childhood memories lived there. I spent summers fishing with Grandpa. We watched sunsets together from the back deck. We sat around bonfires while he told stories about hard work, loyalty, and responsibility. Sarah rarely joined us. She preferred parties, shopping trips, and being the center of attention. Yet somehow, everyone assumed she would inherit the beach house one day. Nobody ever said it directly. It was simply understood. A week before the graduation party, Sarah called me. "You should see the renovation plans I've been collecting," she said excitedly. "Renovation plans for what?" I asked. "The beach house, obviously." I frowned. "You already act like you own it." She laughed. "Come on, Olivia. Everyone knows Dad's giving it to me." The confidence in her voice was impossible to ignore. Apparently, she wasn't even pretending anymore. When the day of the celebration finally arrived, dozens of relatives filled the property. Music played across the backyard. Children ran along the beach. Relatives gathered around tables covered with food and drinks. Every conversation seemed to revolve around Sarah. She's accomplished so much. Your parents must be proud. She deserves everything she's getting. I smiled politely and kept mostly to myself. I had learned years ago that competing for attention in my family was a losing battle. As the evening progressed, I noticed something strange. Several relatives were openly discussing what Sarah would do with the house. She should remodel the kitchen. The upstairs bedrooms need updating. Maybe she'll add a second deck. Nobody talked as if ownership was uncertain. In their minds, the decision had already been made. Around sunset, my father stood and tapped his glass with a spoon. The crowd slowly quieted. Everyone gathered near the patio. Sarah immediately moved to the front. She looked confident, victorious, like someone about to receive exactly what she had always expected. My father wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "We're all here tonight to celebrate Sarah's incredible achievements." Applause filled the air. My mother wiped tears from her eyes. Dad reached into his pocket. Then he pulled out a set of keys, the beach house keys. The crowd immediately understood. Cheers erupted. Several relatives began taking pictures. Sarah's smile widened. "Your mother and I couldn't be prouder," Dad announced. "We've worked hard, and it's time for the next chapter of your life." He placed the keys into Sarah's hand. The applause became even louder. For a moment, it seemed like the entire evening had been building toward that exact scene. Then a chair scraped loudly against the wooden deck. The sound cut through the celebration. Everyone turned. Family attorney Michael Reynolds slowly stood from his seat near the back. His expression wasn't happy. It was serious. Very serious. Dad looked confused. "Everything okay, Michael?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "Actually, there is one more matter that must be addressed." The crowd fell silent. Michael reached into his briefcase and removed an old sealed envelope. The paper was slightly yellow with age. Across the front was Grandpa's handwriting. The moment I saw it, my heart skipped a beat. Michael held it up for everyone to see. Written across the front were the words, "To be opened after Sarah's graduation celebration." A strange silence spread across the backyard. Sarah's confident smile began to fade. "What is that?" she asked. Michael carefully broke the seal. Inside were several pages. He unfolded them and began reading. If you are hearing this letter, then Sarah has completed her graduation and the family has gathered at the beach house. Several relatives exchanged surprised looks. The letter had been written specifically for this moment. Michael continued, For many years, members of this family have assumed the beach house would belong to Sarah. Sarah smiled slightly. Then Michael read the next sentence. That assumption is incorrect. The smile disappeared instantly. The silence became overwhelming. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Michael continued reading. Years ago, I placed the beach house into a protected family trust. Upon Sarah's graduation, the trust officially activates. Confused whispers spread through the crowd. Dad frowned. What does that mean? Michael looked down at the document. It means ownership and management authority transfer to the trustee selected by Richard Parker. Sarah folded her arms. Fine. Who's the trustee? Michael lowered the papers. Then he looked directly at me. Olivia Parker. The world seemed to stop. Sarah stared at me. My parents stared at me. Even I couldn't speak for a moment. Finally, Sarah laughed nervously. That's not funny. Michael didn't smile. It isn't a joke. He opened another folder and removed official legal documents. The trust was filed years ago. Everything was fully legal and effective immediately. He handed the documents to me. My hands trembled slightly as I accepted them. Every signature was authentic. Every page was real. There was no mistake. Dad stepped forward. There must be some misunderstanding. There isn't, Michael replied calmly. Your father personally created these instructions. Sarah's face turned red. Why would Grandpa do that? Michael returned to the letter. The answer came immediately. Because ownership requires responsibility. Nobody said a word. The attorney continued reading. Sarah possesses many wonderful qualities. However, responsibility is measured through actions, not expectations. Sarah looked down. The crowd remained silent. Michael continued. Olivia never sought recognition. She never demanded rewards. Yet throughout her life, she consistently accepted responsibility whenever it appeared. My throat tightened. Memories flooded back. Helping Grandpa repair storm damage after hurricanes. Managing property paperwork while Sarah skipped family obligations. Spending weekends helping him maintain the house. Listening carefully whenever he shared lessons about protecting what mattered. At the time, I thought he was simply teaching me. Now I realized he had been evaluating me, preparing me, trusting me. Michael read the final section. The beach house was never meant to be a prize. It was meant to be protected. Olivia understands that difference. Tears filled my eyes. For years, I had believed Grandpa loved us equally. Now I understood something deeper. He trusted me. Sarah finally looked at me. For the first time all evening, her confidence was gone. This isn't fair, she whispered. I looked at her calmly. It was never about being fair. The crowd listened carefully. It was about protecting what Grandpa spent his life building. Nobody argued, because deep down, everyone knew it was true. I turned toward the family. I'm not kicking anyone out. Several relatives looked relieved. This house belongs to the family. Grandpa wanted all of us to enjoy it. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Dad lowered his head. Years of favoritism suddenly looked insignificant compared to the truth sitting in front of them. The beach house had never been awarded to the daughter who received the most praise. It had been entrusted to the daughter who quietly carried the most responsibility. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, golden light covered the ocean. Nobody cared about the keys in Sarah's hand anymore. They were meaningless. Because the real inheritance had never been ownership. It had been trust. And in the end, Grandpa hadn't left the beach house to the daughter he loved most. He left it to the person he trusted most.
I thought Grandpa's letter was the end of the story. I was wrong. Because what happened after that letter changed our family forever. The room remained silent long after Mr. Reynolds finished reading. Nobody knew what to say. Emily had already stormed out. Mom followed her, while several relatives quietly gathered their things and left. For the first time in years, nobody was celebrating Emily. Dad sat alone at the dining table staring at Grandpa's letter. He looked older somehow, smaller, defeated. I was preparing to leave when Mr. Reynolds stopped me. Claire, there's something else. I turned toward him. What do you mean? He opened his briefcase again and pulled out a small wooden box. I was instructed to give this to you privately. The box looked old, handmade. I recognized it immediately. Grandpa kept it on the bookshelf in his study for years. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single key and another letter. This one had my name written across the front. I carefully unfolded it. Dear Claire, if you're reading this, then everything happened exactly as I expected. A lump formed in my throat. Grandpa knew. He knew what the family would do. He knew who they would choose. And he knew how much it would hurt. The letter continued. For years, I've watched you carry burdens that were never yours to carry. You worked harder than anyone around you and received half the recognition. Yet you never became bitter. Tears filled my eyes. Mr. Reynolds quietly stepped outside to give me privacy. I kept reading. The beach house was only part of my plan. The real gift is hidden somewhere only you will find. I blinked. Hidden? What was Grandpa talking about? The next line explained everything. Remember the lighthouse. My heart nearly stopped. The old lighthouse sat on the northern edge of the property. Most people ignored it. It hadn't operated in years, but Grandpa loved taking me there when I was little. He always said it was his favorite place in the world. Without thinking, I grabbed my coat and headed outside. The wind coming off the ocean was cold and sharp. By the time I reached the lighthouse, the sun was beginning to set. Everything looked exactly the same: the weathered steps, the rusted railing, the wooden bench overlooking the water. Then I noticed something unusual. Under the bench was a small metal panel. I'd never seen it before. My hands shook as I inserted the key from the box. The lock clicked. The panel opened. Inside was a waterproof container, and inside the container was something nobody expected. Documents, lots of them. Property records, investment statements, bank paperwork. At first, none of it made sense. Then I saw the numbers. My eyes widened. Grandpa hadn't just left me the beach house. He had secretly purchased several neighboring properties over the years, land that had dramatically increased in value. The total value was worth millions. I sat there staring at the paperwork, unable to breathe. Grandpa had spent years building something, and somehow he had trusted me to protect it. At that exact moment, my phone started ringing. Emily. I almost ignored it, almost, but something told me to answer. What? I said quietly. Her voice was shaking. You knew, didn't you? No. Stop lying. I closed my eyes. I didn't know anything, Emily. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then her anger disappeared, and what replaced it surprised me. She sounded broken. They always chose me. The words stunned me. What? They always picked me. Her voice cracked. I thought that meant they loved me more. I didn't know what to say because for the first time in our lives, Emily wasn't acting arrogant. She sounded lost. I spent my entire life believing I was special. She laughed bitterly. Turns out I was just protected. The ocean waves crashed against the rocks below. I listened quietly. Grandpa saw everything, didn't he? She asked. Yes. Another long silence. Then she whispered something I never expected. I'm sorry, Claire. I froze. She had never apologized to me, not once, not ever. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. My eyes filled with tears, not because everything was fixed, because for the first time she was being honest. When the call ended, I sat alone beside the lighthouse watching the sunset. The sky turned orange and gold across the water, and suddenly I understood what Grandpa meant years ago when he told me life rewards character. The reward wasn't the house, it wasn't the money, it wasn't the property. It was knowing that when the truth finally came out, I didn't have to prove who I was. My actions had already done that. And for the first time in my life, I felt free.